find your seats and we'll get rolling with the puzzles.
That's not working. Is it in here in the chat or?
Yeah. I like to think I'm loud enough. All right, guys, please find your seats and we'll get rolling with the puzzles panel. It's like herding cats. Any cat owners out there? Yeah, I'm not. Okay, that's fine. There's a name for that. Gracious. All right, folks. I would like to introduce Keith Quinn and Dan Brennan. They are our panelists this afternoon, and they will be talking. It seems like it. It's exciting. They're in offline mode. I saw a couple things I'm interested in, but all right.
Hello. I like to stand while I talk, and I'm going to pass the mic to Dan every once in a while, probably.
Lazy. Can you hear me?
All right, one thing before we get rolling with this. Is anyone going to the Spring Hill, to the hospitality suite this evening? Yes. Yes, there's free booze. So, for you is because they're going shopping right now to buy the booze. What kind of booze would you like in that room? Crystal. Find out. Okay.
Just beer.
Salty caramel with
Smoky. Keystone. Got it. There you go. Peach vodka. All right.
Iced tea and lemonade for that one.
Iced tea
And lemonade.
lemonade.
Okay, just any
Water.
kind of beer, all right, I'm lazy.
All right. All right.
How about some bacon?
You guys know what this is going to be.
what's the sweet note?
It is not sweet. When you come into the Spring Hill Suites Hotel on I-35, Palmer Road, you come in, you turn right, and we're in the room all the way at the end, just past the breakfast bar area. There's like a beautiful room there, and that is where this will be. This will be occurring after our events this afternoon, which include 5 p.m. Country Line, right? So it'll open up after that. And then if you're going to the play this evening, 7400 Cold Canyon Road, Baronsman.
Richard Garriott's Globe Theater replica.
If you have any questions, certainly ask me or ask Winfield. And then there's a 7:30 or 9:30 cruise that some folks are going on. Exciting. I won't be going there. I'll probably be at the hospitality suite. So
it's not hospitality suite all night then, it sounds like?
till 11 p.m.
Is there a table?
There's tables, chairs.
How sturdy
How
is
sturdy
said
is said table?
Would I do surgery on it? I would not. If you happen to bump into it and fall over, and yeah,
Can you request a sturdier table before we get there?
I will do that. Sturdy tables. All right. Macarena. I do believe they will have music and all that kind of stuff. It's just a socializing event. So, all right.
We will have Discord open in there. Just
With no further ado, our panel.
Hello again. Hi. So we're going to talk about the puzzles that we put into Shroud of the Avatar. We'll talk about the pieces that we use, and some of the behind-the-scenes mechanics. We will have spoilers in here, so if you don't want spoilers, I'll try to call them out each time that they come up. Some of them will be just tiny, harmless spoilers, but maybe some might be a bigger deal to some of you. So right now, we are in Broochash, which I call the Brooch. The Brooch! Most of the names of the towns are Richard Garriott. Half of the scene were named before I got there a little over 2 years ago. And when we started doing the cloning, if you know what cloning is, we needed to fill out the world, and we started duping scenes left and right. I came up with a lot of those. Some of them are pretty simple and obvious, like Longfall Woods, pretty simple. Star and some others might have also contributed some. And then I racked my brain for a few of them. Fetid Swamp, Far Hinterlands, North Rockfall Spur. Not that those are crazy, but you know, we tried to have something that had proper flavor for the areas. So, but Brooch Ash was there already. For some reason, the Brooch stuck in my head early on. My hope is that we sort of make it like a center of learning to sort of have this sort of fraternity feel, and there's all sorts of drinking going on there. But I don't know what it's going to end up being. We don't know. That's my dream, though. So in general, we have two types of puzzles that pop up into the game. There's mental puzzles, which are you trying to figure out how to do something, or a physical puzzle, which you might be blocked by something. Maybe it's a wall, maybe there's a tightrope, maybe it's just a door. And early on, things like doors were really the only puzzles that we had. So when I came in like 2 years ago, we had switches that could open doors, and there's nothing to restrict anyone from opening the switch, so you could just go up. You didn't have to be on a quest. You didn't have to have grabbed something beforehand. You could just open a door, and you might need a little exploration to figure out how to open the door. Like you might need to know that there's a secret button over here. We might have also had like a secret container that you didn't know that this rock was actually something that you can click on. It was a container, and you get like a letter or something that would give you a hint for something else. So that's sort of the basic level puzzles that we started with.
And then I think we had a lot of one-off stuff too. A lot of components that were created specifically for the puzzles. That
Like the challenge dungeon is a series of puzzles under one scripting set.
There's a torch puzzle in Ruins of Ravensmoor. That was probably pretty early on.
Yeah, torch puzzle where you the torches can be one color or the other, and as you click one torch, the color shifts, and the torches next to it, their colors shift as well, and you have to sort of work the color of the room until you finish the puzzle and the final door opens. So the puzzles are good because we want to test the players' either personal skill or their character skill or their knowledge of the game or something that they have picked up early on. There might have been a quest that gave you some information, or just some random conversation that some character talks about, and maybe you remember that when you're in the area, like, oh, that character said something about this room. I was supposed to look for something, supposed to see something, and then you might sort of start looking for something that's a puzzle. And we like players being tested like that. We don't necessarily want you to just go from here, A to B to C to D because we tell you to. We want you to be inspired to explore the area and the objects in the area and feel like you've earned something at the end.
And to have an impact on the environment. You're actually interacting with this space as opposed to moving through it.
Yeah, so we have some goals and philosophy when we work on our puzzles. Hopefully we inspire you to explore areas. We also want you to, we want a puzzle to be completable. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you feel successful in it. I guess a puzzle could be if there's like a bunch of broken boards on a walkway, and you walk over it and it falls underneath. That's kind of a puzzle. You know, maybe you could have been aware that that's probably a bad place to stand and you shouldn't have stood there. So a trap is kind of a puzzle. So in starting around a year ago, and continuing to today, we started having extra tools come in. I'm trying to think of the order that I had. Let me look at my notes here. So some of the early stuff, like I said, we had basic switches. We had things that could block you. Usually it was like a wall or a door. We had things that you can break through, separate from the switch. So like we have these breakaway cave walls that we have in some underground areas. We have animators. So sometimes a thing moves, like a door can close, or a drawbridge can come down. We had drawbridge in one area, but we're going to be moving it into more areas. We have what we call world objects, which might be a letter that gives you a hint. Might be a key that lets you open a locked door. And of course, locks were something that we had as in our toolbox. We would have containers, which could be a treasure chest. It could be a corpse. It could be one of those secret rocks, hideaway rocks. Could be breakable crates and barrels. I know early on in some breakable crates, I would put like small things in there so that when you broke the crate, you know, every once in a while you'd see something in there. Maybe it's like a miniature ship or
Oh, right, you got a little chaos statue in one of them.
chaos statue one, yeah. So little things you're like, well, I didn't really expect anything in there. So just a little Easter egg, kind of. And then of course, NPC conversations could give you hints, hints or actually direct you somewhere. These days, I help also write quests, but back then I didn't. And we only had Scott, or Lum, who was sitting here before, who would make quests, and he was focused on the main storyline, so there were really not a lot of side quests. So an example, if Dan will go into this maid shop in the Bruges. This is an example of a simple switch, like the switches I've been talking about. So if you go upstairs, Dan.
Uncustomary control scheme here, so bear with me.
So this is actually a fairly new setup. New in the sense that it's, I think I made it 6 months ago or 8 months ago, so it wasn't like 2 years ago. But it's a good example of what we had 2 years ago. So there's a bookcase there, and if you know the building, you know there's actually a room on the other side. This is a spoiler. It's a minor spoiler because there's really nothing special in there, and we have this building in quite a few scenes. But if you find the right book, I don't remember what it is. It could be this one.
Let's see.
Yeah, you go. Open that up. And then you can open that door. But hurry up because it'll close on you. So this is more the Easter egg puzzle. Something you really wouldn't have seen otherwise. And I guess there's a few things in here you can steal if you're the sort of person who steals. And there's obviously an alchemy station. Nice.
That's an Easter egg one, or?
Yeah, it's an Easter egg. It's a minor Easter egg because this is not a unique situation. We have certain buildings that we reuse in multiple scenes. So every cloned town that uses this layout will have the same building right there.
Unless you modify it later when you declone.
Yeah, when we declone it, like we did with like Brookside and those other towns, this building might actually go away or might be replaced with a different one. The Magic Shop, we actually have like an A and a B version. This is the B version that has the secret part of it, but the A version you can get in that room without any problem. The A version is exactly the same as the Magic Shop that players can put in their pots, in their player-owned towns. So pretty simple stuff. And of course, another part of our philosophy is that we don't want to trap players anywhere. So if we put you in somewhere, we want to let you get out. So right here, there's a switch that will move the bookcase out of the way. The door I couldn't get rid of because it's a basic part of the house, and I didn't want to break the house to make it unique. So I left the door in and put the bookcase there, and eventually the bookcase moves back. And there's a hint that you can see on the ground. They put a little bit of dust stuff there to suggest that it moves better than I do. So pretty simple stuff. So then, so the extra things we started getting were better ways to manipulate switches. Because right now, what we could do with switches in the early days, and the problems that we had were that, so one switch did one thing, that's it. And there were no restrictions on it, so anyone could do it. So anyone sort of came in that room could use that switch. We could say that one switch has an invisible collision blocker on a second switch and also a third switch, so maybe you can't use those until you use this first switch. And that's okay, but then later on, our programmers said to Dan and I, "What are you doing? Switches are meant to sort of go on and off. And if they don't go just off by default, then potentially they could be out of sync for players, and that's terrible. because you could switch something and something could change, but maybe it didn't change for the guy who came in 2 minutes later, and then it's potentially a big problem.
It's a tricky one too, because as we're setting these areas up, we don't necessarily see the issues that are multiplayer side. So it's one that kind of has to come back a little bit later and be addressed.
Yeah, in general, when we set these things up, we do it as in the single, we're just by ourselves. Kind of, Dan would be playing in the editor, much like he's right now, and then run into the room and test it. Does it work? Do it 3 or 4 times in a couple different ways. Does it work all those different ways? Sounds good. Let's move on, and our QA team will test it.
Multiplayer though. Yeah. What about multiplayer?
And then we get errors letting us know that the multiplayer doesn't work, and then we realize why it doesn't work that way and fix it. And then, of course, over time, we learn what ways don't work in multiplayer, either from suggestions by players or because our programmers panic and they run into us and tell us how to fix it.
Today, actually, isn't it?
Another one? Yeah, okay. So, so some of the things that got added to our toolbox, and actually before we move on, Dan, if you want to show there's 2 screenshots I have in there, and we can show those. So show the other one first. So one thing that got added is this activator logic node. So the activator logic node is something that tracks how many of something are in use. So let's say I'm over here, and there's a switch over here. Dan's over there, there's a switch over there. I use this switch, stays active for 2 seconds, and then resets. Same thing with Dan's switch. Now the thing is, I can't hit this switch and then run over and hit that switch because I'm not fast enough, and they both need to be hit at the same time. So I hit this, Dan hits that. They both send the message out to our activator logic node and said, oh, 2 switches up, do that last thing, and solve the puzzle. And that's pretty awesome, because then we'll have stuff like maybe a door doesn't open unless I hit the switch or stand on a platform, while Dan's also doing the same thing over there. So the 2 of us are required. It's a 2-man operation. So now actually we are setting up multiplayer situations, and our puzzles now went from basic to actually starting to get in a respectable area. These are real puzzles now. This is not just opening a door or something. We use these. If you see stuff that says connection port, that's our little middleman or handshake from one thing to the other. You can think of it when the switch moves, it pings a connection port and says, I did my thing. And the activator or logic node says, has my connection port been pinged? Oh, it has? Then I do it. So it's a middleman gimmick. So a connection port was also another thing that was added to our toolbox. And I thought it was a small thing at first, but it's actually super awesome. Because at the same time that they added this as a switch concept, as something that connects to switches, they also added it to doors and interactive locks, and the third thing, I can't remember what it was. Containers. So I can say when this lock, when someone uses a key on this lock, send a signal out to move a switch or open a door somewhere else that's not even normally connected to this, or open 5 doors if you wanted to, or 6 switches and 5 doors and all sorts of things. So it's great. It allows a big network. And as they gave us this stuff, they said, this will all be synced up for all players. So if I do the thing that makes the 5 doors happen, they also open for Dan. And if you come in 10 minutes later, those doors are still open. Then it's not like they think they're closed for you, but open for me. So that's starting to get super excited about it.
And the less we as designers have to worry about the multiplayer side of things, the more it actually just works, just as it is, the better it is. We can just keep doing our thing and know comfortably that it'll be fine.
And that's in a given scene, right? So
Right, everything is self-contained in one scene. We can't signal something to happen in another scene. We can fake that by sometimes giving you a quest flag, which we can kind of do now a little bit. We're sort of like halfway in that getting to awesome with that, where I can easily give you a quest flag from in a conversation with a character. And I actually do that a lot now. What we can do now is if you have a quest flag, you can use a switch, or if you don't have that quest flag, you can't use that switch. What's tough is if you use that switch, can I give you a quest flag? That's the gray part right now, but things are getting better. So that'll also start happening. So if you switch to the other thing, the other screenshot. So this big monstrosity is the interactive switch. I use switch in two ways. Sometimes I'll talk about a switch on the wall, but usually when I say switch, I'm actually talking about this component that we can add to an object that may actually look like a switch, or may look like a button, or it may look like a big rocky monolith that can spin in its center, or whatever. Or it could actually be nothing. It could be like a phantom switch that other things talk to, and then when this switch that you can't interact with actually learns that other things have been done in the scene, it says, okay, I'm going to do the big magical thing that has to happen right now. Yep.
Is this a natural thing in Unity 5 that you're using, or is there
No. We had an old interactive switch, which was simple, but I think we made it, and that was a thing that couldn't be in sync. So we actually remade every switch in the game with this replacement version, which made me super nervous. And we had a couple of false starts, like over 2 months, about how to convert it, automatically convert it. And our programmers refined things much better than I was dreading what happened. I thought Dan and I would have to go in and just change like hundreds of them. We changed dozens because they needed to be manually adjusted, because there was no way the automation was going to convert it over. Simple switches like light switches and stuff would be fine, but our complex puzzles, like some of the stuff we're about to go into, they needed some manual loving, like the Steam puzzle we're about to see.
Just a quick question. So when you say scene,
When I say scene, I mean like a map. Like if you go, like when we were in Brute, the scene is a term that Unity uses. When I go into Bruchash, or if I go into Brittany Sewers, that's a scene.
okay, got it.
Yeah.
So I might flip the switch, but the door can be pretty far away.
Yeah, it can be anywhere on that map.
Got it.
No, we can go to Brittany Sewers. So as we started getting some of these new tools, I had to convert, well, we both had to convert some of our existing puzzles. We had a couple of existing puzzles. I had this one in Brittany Sewers, and Dan had one in Kiln Cistern, which we might see later. If you want a slew, I'll try to. Not in this scene. Kiln's all Dan. If you want to hate or praise Dan for Kiln Cistern, he's right here. It might be this. So go down, straight down, yeah. And then just drop yourself and see if that's it.
Wish me luck, folks.
Look up. I don't know where you are.
This looks like it might be right. Yeah?
Oh, you're in the wrong room. So go out here,
You got to be on the other side.
and you can either slew across or just jump in the water. So if you're coming from the wrong way, we have a non-puzzle way to get through. Some backstory on Brittany Sewers. I had in mind, we had a plan to put in Brittany Sewers. No one said what that plan was. It was just like a listing in some chart. Like, well, I guess Brittany should have a sewers. So I came up with a plan, and we kept going back and forth with Dan, and every once in a while we keep coming back to it. But the plan was basically, Brittany also, by the way, was originally just going to be one scene, one neighborhood. It was just Brittany. And then later on exploded into 6 neighborhoods. Central Brittany, Brittany Graveyard, Brittany Wharfs, and the other ones. So the plan for Brittany Sewers was that you should be able to access the sewers from any one of the scenes. But we also kind of wanted it big. We could start small and modularly add to it. But so I was the first to tackle it. And mostly it's been me now. Dan has touched it a little bit, but we have three main sections. What I call the dockside section, which was the first to go in, the catacombs section, which is halfway in, and then the caverns section, which isn't done yet. You could go into Central Brittany and Brittany alleys. Each one has an entrance, and you can meet up at a meeting point in the middle of between those two. And then from there, you can go through this puzzle to a central hub where you can meet people from the other four entrances. So each of the thirds would have 2 ways to get in, meet up, go to the hub. 2 ways to get in, meet up, go to the hub. So that way anyone can sort of just meet up through here. And then each one would sort of roughly feel the same. So if there's a puzzle in here to get to that central hub, it'd be a puzzle in the catacombs area to get to the central hub, and a puzzle in the caverns area. So the first puzzle here is the steam puzzle. The concept was, it's sort of a 2-part puzzle. You do the spin some wheels, and you can see the red wheel right here. You spin some wheels, and in sequence, it would appear to allow steam to get to the next junction of wheels, and then you can make a decision as to which one you would use, and then the next, if you did the right one, the next junction would be available. And then after you got halfway, you sort of had to reset the whole thing and start some feeding steam onto the other side. And I did this the old way. It was kind of rough to set up. I was confident in it, and then of course later on, the programmer said, nothing in this is guaranteed to be synced. It's horrible. We need to revamp all our switches. The way I did it before was kind of like what I was saying before. One switch would basically block or grant access to the next switch. So when you turn the first wheel, a invisible blocker would be removed from the next switches, and so on. What it does now, it's like it uses the new switch system, and there's extra magic going on, but still it ended up working essentially the same way. The people familiar with this steam puzzle?
I'll confess, I solved this puzzle, but then I keep going back to it, and I keep not remembering how to solve it.
Yeah.
Like I still have to spend time figuring it out again.
If Dan, did you spin the first wheel? Yeah. Yeah. So if you follow the pipes, you can kind of see where everything goes. There's a couple things that are happening in this puzzle that I like happening in other puzzles, which is feedback. So as you do a puzzle, you hit the switch. Simple feedback is that the wheel moves. You hit it, or if it was like a lever, the lever would move. That's simple feedback. You know you did it, and after a while it goes back. It gets reset. So in this, I also have, you can see the steam right in the middle to let you know that steam has now reached this junction, and then you can use one or the other. And then when you spin a wheel, if Dan will spin the one on the right, and yeah, that one. Yeah. And then you look around the room, yeah, and you can see that now steam is here where it wasn't before. And then if you do the one on the left, the one on the right is a fail. Turn to the right a little bit. It ends pretty quickly. If Dan were to spin this, then steam would come out, and you'd know right away you failed. And if you go all the way back to the first one, the very first switch, the master, which is a little bit bigger than the rest, and they also have these little tooltips on them to let you know if it's locked or usable. Then the first one actually resets all of them. So do the one on the left. And you can see steam has just popped out right next to it to let you know that steam is going on that direction. And if we were to look at the end of the line, we would see that steam is also there to let you know steam is now at this junction. Or in this case, the door is now open that Dan has just moved to. So that's actually the first part of the puzzle. And that wasn't really too tough in either the old way or the new way. It's too tough to set up. The extra monkey wrench, I'm always throwing the extra monkey wrench in there, whether it's a puzzle or all these quests I do lately. So now Dan he can't get past the second door. He can easily get back because that first door, once you open it, it's open until the scene closes down and comes back up again, then everything resets back to new. So if Dan goes all the way back and hits the master switch again, so this master switch actually sets everything back to the starting point, except that door on his left. That hasn't changed. So now go to the first switch again. Yeah, so we need steam on the left one. Oh, actually, you reset it, but you didn't start the steam again. And I know that because there's no steam at that junction. Also, these letters down here, they're kind of a hint that, you can open that, quick one. It's sort of a hint that that the doors are opened by the steam to let you know that you should be doing something with the steam puzzle. So hints and tooltips and all that are also feedback, pre-feedback maybe. So the one on the left you want to do, because the right one is a fail. And now turn around. So this one, the one on the left, feeds the other side of the wall. So now you can go back to the door that was closed. If Dan were to look up, you'd see a pipe that goes up and over this wall that he just walked through, and it's actually above him right now. And if you go through, that pipe goes through the wall, and it's on the left, and it's feeding here. So spin the one on the right. Door's still closed, but you feed this. But actually, before you open that, look up to the left. If you were coming in from the center, originally it didn't matter, but now you can actually come in through the catacomb side, through the Brittany graveyard, and then there's a puzzle there, and then you can work your way to the middle. If you're actually trying to work your way all the way to the central Brittany area, you can actually jump through this without having worried about any switches or anything. You just jump in here and then jump in the water, and then climb out and then just keep going. But the hard way is going toward the center, so Dan can spin that. And the last door opens, and then it just stays open. Even if someone hits the reset, both doors will stay open. And that's that puzzle. That was one that had to be reworked, and I reworked it a few times in the 2-month period because of our updates. This was my basically test scenario. I knew how it worked backwards and forwards. So and it wasn't super complicated. So this is what I used whenever our programmers say, "All right, I made a big change to the new switch system. We need you to let us know if it works right." And then I'd go back here and completely rework it from scratch.
One thing I like a lot about that puzzle is the misdirection. It's something I use in a few different puzzles, but this idea that the first part of the solution to the puzzle actually undoes the final part of the solution to the puzzle. So you actually have to. It kind of goes against your normal thinking. You have to pull yourself back out of the solution so you can go forward again.
Part of the reason Dan likes it is because it's an idea I stole from him. We were chatting about puzzles and just sort of spitballing things, and this is mostly something sort of he came up with, maybe on the fly, and I started like, oh man, that's something I can easily steal, and I could just picture in my head how it works, and I made like a demo version, and so Dan didn't do anything with it. Ideas are not copyrightable, so I stole it, and I'm happy to say it's mine. I ruined it for you.
There's no fishing in there.
There should be, yeah, because we have swimmable areas, and essentially if you can swim it, you can fish in it.
Some sewer fish?
Yeah.
So going through this allows you to get, what's the satisfying achievement of the person going through this particular one, and then as you build more of these kind of switch scenes, what is your intent to find more Easter eggs? It leads you to Easter eggs. What is the player's end experience of achieving this?
So the reward for this is access to the next area.
Okay.
You can't get to the center until you pass through this, or someone does it for you. There's a jumping puzzle early on on the in the same scene toward the Brittany Alleys area. It's not too complicated. I think most people won't see it as a jumping puzzle, but if they actually jump a few spots, they'll learn a discovery, a compass discovery.
So how terrifying are the jumping puzzles to be? 'Cause I can't jump for friends.
I'm not a good jumper, and I could do it. So,
If you can do it, I can do it. Sandy.
yep, yep. Yeah. By the way, I'm Sanio on the forums, and he's Plague of Locust on the forums. Plague of Locust, one locust.
Oh, he's jumping around.
So another thing we had, I don't have a place to show it, but I talked about traps. We have pressure plates, a part of our new toolbox. What a pressure plate is it's kind of like a switch, but really when you step on it, it doesn't just go boop and then maybe turn off later on. It knows that you're still on it, and for as long as you are on it, then something is happening. Maybe there's fire, spinning out of a hole in the wall, or spikes will just keep coming up as long as you're on it. And that's actually a special thing, and the making sure everything's synced for all players was super important for that. That sort of became the poster child, or the programmers, that was a big thing for the programmers working on it, to make sure that everything was in sync. Pressure plates were like an important way to make that happen. Something we can also do now sometimes is trigger spawning, make a bad guy appear as part of a puzzle. For a long time, even though we didn't use it, we had the ability to only make a character, an enemy appear, an NPC appear, if you got close to where he should be. Which, for Dan and I, normally what we do, by the way, we're level designers, so we put the bad guys in the world, we make sure there's enough onks, we make sure that there's discoveries for your compass. We flesh out the scene. We do some of the world building stuff, I do some of the quest stuff, Dan does a lot of work on the player-owned towns, but mostly we sort of flesh out the scenes, and nowadays part of fleshing out the scene is the puzzle. So we put in regular bad guys all over the place, and we make sure that if you kill enough of them, they start coming back, and that's great. But how do you make a boss guy appear? That's actually kind of tricky. So our programmers worked with me to come up with a wave-based battle system, which basically just says if you are in the area, then bad guys will appear, the first wave of bad guys. And by killing those bad guys, maybe just the door opens when they're all dead. Pretty simple. Kind of like what happens in the challenge dungeon, Chilblain's Compendium of Pain and Suffering. That happens room to room to room to room, and that's actually a special custom setup that is very troublesome. Over time, it's more and more troublesome as we make other improvements, and this doesn't play nice with that stuff. We'll probably revamp it sometime in the near future with this new wave-based gimmick. So the wave-based gimmick is kind of nice because it could be just like kill 3 guys and then a door opens. But we can also say kill 3 beta wolves in Soulsbridge Outskirts, and then an alpha wolf appears. And then because the alpha wolf wasn't there before, maybe he's a little tougher than the other guys. And when you kill him, maybe you get something special, like you're completing a quest, or maybe you pick up that quest that you didn't even know was available from some other guy. We just give it to you, like just because, why not? You shouldn't have to go pick up the quest and say, but I killed that thing. Why didn't I just sort of know I killed him before? And we can also have, even more than just like 2 waves. In Brittany Sewers, where we were at before, I mentioned that the goal is to get to the center. There's actually a boss fight in the center, which was the first one of these wave battles.
Should I do that?
No, that's okay. When you drop into that room where these guys are, there's the first wave is triggered, you kill them, the second wave is triggered, and then you kill there's 3 guys who equal a boss. And also all the while there are traps. I forgot what the traps are. It's the arrows that get shooting at you.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so there's an environmental hazard, which are these traps. And then when you kill these bosses, you have successfully completed the room. A door opens on the far side, and then you get access to like a treasure room which had some nice extra treasure, but now it also has the Banner of Honor in there. So there's a special reward that also we're now able to give out. So,
Pretty good sized party.
do you? I'm good. That's good. I like that.
And it's a one-way trip.
Sometimes I worry. I mean, I play the game a little bit, but and, you know, not like you guys probably, and not like Andrea.
You're either gonna succeed or you're
Yeah, awesome.
there's no way out.
Nice. Yeah, and also in this room, there's no way out. It's succeed or die.
Exactly.
Yeah, and a little bit of a sort of after death, not really a puzzle, but since you can't get out otherwise, and you're a ghost if you're dead, we have an Ankh there, and you can resurrect. But the point that we teleport you to is actually outside the room, so you're not stuck in there. I don't want you ever stuck in a puzzle or room. It's just terrible.
I got stuck, Craig, no, sorry,
Where?
Clink?
Oh, the Clink is super old.
Yeah. And
Super.
You activate a switch, it opens up the jail cell.
Yeah.
And it's a time thing though, but once you're in the jail cell, you're done. You can't get out. There's no, like, unless there's a hidden button somewhere.
I believe that's one of the places I put a hidden button. So
Every brick
there are a lot of jail cells in a couple of scenes.
on switch as well.
Yeah.
Every brick, and there is no activated switch.
So if I'm in a cell and I'm looking at one of the doors, the beds are like either here or here against the wall. The interactable brick is either over here or over here. So it's not, you know, on the far side of the door. It's on the wall to the left or right of the door. If it's not in there, you can put a bug, and then I'll say, okay, I'll find wherever it was that I actually did put that, and I will make sure the same gimmick is there.
This whole thing was an elaborate plan to get you to trap yourself again.
Yeah, because I hate that, and I'm like, but if you're in a cell, how can I get you out? And what I do in some other areas, I have like a teleporter, like in the control points. Like if anyone's done any control points, they're like our wave battle system with a different spin. But you fight waves of guys, and if you fight enough waves, then these different treasure room doors open. We don't really have treasure in the rooms right now, but what I did to disallow you from hanging out in a treasure room, when the door was closed, I put a teleporter that kicked you out. You had a question like that? Yeah. There's two, maybe more than two, I guess more than two ways to get out of those cells. Besides, you could do /stuck, but also if you log out and log back into the same scene, it should put you at the very start of that scene. All of our underground areas, I think, work that way. That's our intent, so that you get reset at the start, which is different than a regular above ground scene, whereas you can log out in Bruchash or wherever, and then when you log back in, you're in the same spot. So if Dan logged out in the magic shop, he can log back in. Right, yeah. You can't just log out and back in. You have to log out, give it like, I forget what it is, 5 minutes, 10 minutes for the scene to shut down. Where are we now, Dan? Okay, no, Libris is good. You have to slew, these aren't the statues. I always have trouble finding it, but it's up on the turn to face the mountains, wherever they are. Spin 180. Keep going. Nope.
Is this the wrong one, maybe?
No, Libris is truth. Is this, how old is this?
Yeah, it does seem like it might be an old version, right?
All right, this is super old, so this is not going to have the puzzle I wanted to show off. But so one of the new types, using the new tools that we have, the logic activator, the connection ports, in Libris, is another small spoiler, but what you saw here was the old version of Libris. The new version has like this big mountainside that has all these cells. Justice was a big concept here. So there's a prison, multi-level prison. And as you go through the prison cells and up the ramps, you will eventually get to a spot that you can't pass through because there's the gate in front of you. And there's some statues, 2 statues before the gate, one on either side of the path. You might not think there's anything special about them. They're not facing any particular way, but if you hover your mouse over the statue, there's a text hint that suggests something. And if you pick up on that hint, you could double-click at each statue, and it'll turn. Eventually, it'll turn back. But if you have them both turned in the right direction at the right time, then that door will open. So it's kind of a simple puzzle, but it wouldn't have worked too great with the old system. But with the new sync system and the extra tools, it will work awesome.
This is another uncloned map. It looks like
And yeah, my Steam puzzle there might have actually been the old version.
yeah.
It could have been. And I bet Middle Downs is not.
It's not. No, this is the old one. That's what I'm
All right. Kiln Cistern will be okay.
Yeah.
Check something here. I'll also mention quick Middle Downs, then Dan can go to Kiln Cistern right now. So Middle Downs. Oh, you had a question? That would be something else. So what Dan and I would have to do is we would have to have, there would be nothing portable. It wouldn't be anything you can get for your pot or anything that. We'd have to have something in the scene probably that would suggest that you can trap this thing. You'd sort of hit a switch that might actually look like a switch, and then probably something visual will change to let you know that the dynamite is now duct taped to the wall or whatever it is. Yeah, it's not ready yet. But we're working on the door that is trapped in a certain way. So Middle Downs is kind of recent. If you haven't been to Middle Downs, there's 4 big mounds, and then an even larger mound in the center. And inside each mound, there's a switch. There's several switches. If you hit the right one, and you don't know what the right one is necessarily right away, if you hit the right one in each of the 4 mounds, you get access to a special area in the center mound. And it's not that complicated, but because there's so many combinations that you could just stumble through, what we did was we had hints on the top of the mound. And the mound's like a big grassy mound that you can go in. It's got a room on the inside. But on top, there's kind of like, you can almost think of it like a sundial. There's like a little post and some stones with some special markings on them. And the markings sort of suggest a time of day, like there's a caveman painting of terrain and then a place where the sun might be. And another spoiler, if the we can't do puzzles really based on time of day. It's difficult. We have some way to do a little piece, but at the time, which was only a couple months ago, we couldn't. So what we tried to make use of was just the natural sky dome, the natural movement of the sun and the shadows that can be cast. So as the shadow from the sun casts its light on the post on the top of the mound, and the shadow gets cast on the ground. And then the shadow might be pointing to one of the markers on the top of the mound. Each marker, remember, has like a little symbol where the sun is. And if the sun in the sky is in a certain position and it matches where the shadow is hitting, the symbol of where the shadow is hitting, I don't know if I'm explaining well, then that's the hint. So if it's the sun's in the morning part of the sky, and if the shadow is pointing at a stone that shows the sun in the morning part of the sky, that's a match. And then you know you can go inside the mound and hit the morning switch. And then if you hit the right switch on each, you get access to the center. There's a little combat buff that you can get when you're inside, and you can go fight a guy that's slightly tougher than the rest of the map in one area, and you get a little extra power. So that was a point of that.
So one quick question.
Yeah.
Can other players mess up your sequencing? Because some of these are far apart if you're trying to...
Yeah, they don't have to be done in order. So that was also important, and they don't reset.
Okay. So once you got it going, nobody else is gonna mess
Yeah. So if I'm figuring out independent of you, I don't even know you're in this map, and you're doing, I'm doing the first one, you're doing the fourth one, and we sort of like meet in the middle. We could say like, hey, I already did this one. You go, oh, that's great, I did that other one. Oh, cool. Let's go on to number 2 and number 3.
Each mound, you can only have one, there's only one button that you can have depressed at any one time. So it's feasible if someone wanted to do this to go to one and stay on the wrong switch. If people want to do that, I don't know.
Yeah. If Dan wants to grief us, he can go to that third one and just keep making the wrong decision. Or, yeah.
Quick question. Randomizing some of these puzzles. On a single player, when you enter the scene, the sequence of switching could be randomized. Maybe not with your system, but
You can do it in any order, but we don't have a way to randomize things.
the idea is that when one person solves it, they post it on a wiki. Okay?
Yep.
And I'm wondering if you guys are thinking about the technology where, let's say, either multiplayer or single player, you go into a small room, and only one person going at a time, and you got to get to the other side.
Mhm.
Each person going in has a random puzzle. They step on the blocks.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of ways to randomize. We could do, like, say if you need a key and you need to get it from killing a guy, we can make it so that the guy, sometimes he pops up over there, sometimes he pops up over there, sometimes he's over there. So you don't know exactly where he is. We do that kind of thing. We have one of our newest gimmicks is, it's kind of a way to randomize where an object appears in the world. So if there was a key on the table, not on the guy, sometimes it could be on the table, sometimes it could be in the back over there, sometimes it could be down the hall. And so even if you know that key was here the first time you went through, it might not be here the second time around. You might have to go somewhere else.